This is my first time in India, but I felt like I'd been here before because I had seen it so often from space. As we would fly over it, and I would admire it.
What's it like being in space?
It's magical. I think you remember the most is viewing our planet.
Space is one of those businesses where you need heavy investor backing. You need money which literally gets burned as you go up.
The number of people who ask me the question of whether it's even legal to build a private rocket company in India is way too many to answer. If you can go build a SpaceX, if you have the money for it and the technology for it, you can do that in India.
India is also awakening to privatization in the space sector. In 2018, there were 4 companies. Now there are 300 companies in India.
We've sent up too many things in space and we don't know how to really manage the space debris next in space, about the sustainability.
Orbits have always been sort of a resource where you place satellites, but right now that's also a resource where you can place humans. Both the space industry and space sustainability, both has to go hand in hand.
It is such a privilege for me to be sharing the stage with, of course, the pioneers of our space startups, but more importantly, Dr. Mike Massimino, a NASA astronaut, has very graciously agreed to be with us in person in India. And it's such an honor to share the stage with him. So thank you once again on behalf of NXT
Thank you for
doing this. I will come to what's next in space in just a moment, but space is a sector that excites me, and I think that happens because I don't understand most of the technology and I don't know how things work. But I will begin by asking you, what's it like being in space?
That was for me. What's it like in space? It's magical. It's interesting because it's a bit stressful because you're doing your job, whatever that might be, on your mission. My missions were both on the space shuttle, I had 2 missions to the Hubble Space Telescope, so we did a lot of spacewalking, and the Hubble Space Telescope is this great instrument, very important, making great discoveries. So our job was to treat it as best as we could, to improve it, to make it better so the scientists could use it. So there was that responsibility underlying all of it. So it's a job, it's work, but at the same time, it's just magical to be up there. The teamwork that we had with my crew and working with the people on the ground, those who prepared us and those who took care of us in mission control, supported us during the missions. It was a wonderful team to be a part of, and the scientists we work with the Hubble Space Telescope throughout the world. So it was great to be a part of that team. But what I think you remember the most is viewing our planet, of how beautiful it is. I mentioned earlier, this is my first time in India, but I felt like I'd been here before because I had seen it so often from space. As we would fly over it, and I would admire it. You could see at nighttime, you see the city lights. During the day, you see the terrain, and it's a beautiful place. And so I've always had this connection with India and other places that I've flown over that I've never been to. So it's wonderful to be here and experience it from the ground and get to see a little bit and meet the people. And of course, India's played a role in the American program and is continuing to play a larger role now coming up in the space program. But what it's like, it is really a magical experience. And you get to see the planet, you see the beauty of the planet. I think we're living in an absolute paradise. It's very fragile. We need to take care of our planet, and it's one we all share. And I think that out of the work was important, I felt, and the teamwork made it all happen. But I think the experience of being there and realizing how lucky we are to be here on planet Earth, that is the most compelling reason to go to space.
Dr. Massimino, I also want to, of course, understand from you, does it change your perspective about humanity, about life, when you just get that opportunity to absorb everything from space? Because that's something that all of us wonder, what would it be like to just go above there and just see the Earth? I want to understand, did it change your perspective about life?
It really did. It happened to me, it happened on my second spacewalk. So seeing the planet from the cabin, you look out, as soon as you get to space, you want to see what's out there. What does the planet look like at night? What do the stars look like? So you want to get that experience, of course. But you're looking through the window of the spaceship when you're doing that. And when you go outside for a spacewalk now, you're the whole sky opens up, the whole universe really opens up to you, and you can look anywhere you want. And it was my first spacewalk. I was kind of very intently getting used to things. I was a new guy and just kind of stuck to what my tasks were. But on my second spacewalk, I felt a little more comfortable. It actually was a bit easier, the spacewalk, the tasks we had, and I had more time to just enjoy the view. And there was a point where we just had installed a new instrument into the Hubble, and we got ahead of schedule a little bit. And I knew I had a few minutes because my spacewalking partner, Jim Newman, was going to come help me with something, and he was getting ready to do that. But I had a few moments to look, and it was a day pass, and I just kind of lost myself in the view of our planet. And the thought that went through my mind was, this is a view from heaven. This is a heavenly view, to see it from here. And then I thought, after about a moment, I thought, no, that's not quite it. This is what heaven must look like. It's a complete paradise. And you see the beauty of our Earth, but you also see the fragility of it. It's a very thin atmosphere, and we know that it's a fragile place. But when you see it from space, you see the atmosphere, just a thin blue line. If you think of the Earth as an onion, that top thin layer of the onion is the size relationship of our atmosphere to the rest of the planet. So it's you feel the fragility of it. I could only see that view because I was wearing a spacesuit. But you see it as such a beautiful and a perfect place. There's no borders. It's very harmonious. And that does stay with you. I do think we're living in a very special place. We're very lucky to be here on planet Earth. We need to take care of it as best we can, and it's a place we all share. But I see that you see the beauty from space, but you can engage it on Earth. And so I try to remember that view from space every day when I am here, and it's such a beautiful place here in India. Some of the things I've gotten to see so far and getting to meet the wonderful people here, it gives you that perspective from space, but you can engage it every day in our lives here. And I think we need to try to be amazed every day that we spend here on Earth.
At the same time, Dr. Massimino, I also want to understand from you, you went from being an engineer to becoming an astronaut. What was that transition like, and what really motivated you or propelled you to make that change or to accept that opportunity?
Well, the astronaut job has got lots of different different types of people working in there. So I'm an engineer, as you said. We also have military people, test pilots, but people with other occupations in the military, scientists, medical doctors. I've flown in space with a geologist, with an oceanographer, with a veterinarian. So we have lots of different occupations. I think that each one of those skill sets, the commonality is the ability to solve problems. I think a STEM education, a science technology generated type of education teaches you how to work in teams to solve complex problems, how to work together to accomplish goals, and how to think about maybe a very complex problem and then figure out ways to engage it. And I think that that's the common thing that you'll find, I think, with most astronauts. We come from some sort of technical background. It might not be engineering, it could be science, it could be aviation, but the ability to solve problems. And I think that prepares you very well to be an astronaut. It gives you maybe the foundation. And then for me, being a civilian, once I became an astronaut, there was a great deal of adventure I had to get used to, flying in high-performance aircraft and learning how to do spacewalks and doing things that I thought were a little bit crazy. I was trained to do those things. So I think it's important you get that good educational foundation. In my case, it was engineering. It can be lots of other foundations as well. And then the space program is really good of training you to learn to apply what you know to the problems you're going to be working on in space.
All right, so we have three more, our space startup founders here. They're in various positions in the startups, and they also have, of course, technical backgrounds like yourself. I want to ask Rohan with Bellatrix Aerospace, do you ever feel that you may want to transition to something as Dr. Massimino has done? You know, he's gone from being an engineer to actually being an astronaut. Is that something that you also ever look forward to? You're making the rockets that go up, but my question is, do you want to ever sit in one of them and be in space?
Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to sit with you. Well, that's the final goal for anybody in getting into space entrepreneurship. for example, you always have this fascination of going to space, but and build technologies that go to space. So we're taking baby steps. We work on in-space propulsion and mobility, going to the moon, going to Mars. That's where we come. And we'd love to see a future where that becomes a reality, going to the moon, going to Mars in our lifetime. And now that India is also awakening to privatization in the space sector, so there are, believe me or not, in 2018, there were 4 companies. Now there are 300 companies in India working on space. So, yeah.
Yes, that's a point to note that we barely had any, and today we have over 300 private space companies operating in India. So that's a huge achievement for our nation. Srinath, coming to you next from Agnikul Cosmos, I want to understand from you, how has that experience been working with, say, the government in terms of the support you need to set up a private space company? Because at the end of the day, every venture, when you get into it, you want it to be profitable. But space is one of those businesses where you need heavy investor backing. You need money which literally gets burned as you go up. So how has that experience been operating in India?
Yeah, it's been very different, I think, over the last 6 years, right? So when we started in 2017, literally the number of people who ask me the question of whether it's even legal to build a private rocket company in India is way too many to answer here, right? And from there, in 2022, with the government support, we were able to set up our own private launch pad within the country. So I think that has been a marvelous transformation. In the early years, I mean, as a founder, raising money is one of the things that you always think about. A lot of questions where, you had to figure out the best explanation to say, will India allow you to launch privately, right? We had to always beat around the bush, to be honest. And that was still 2020. And then with the whole, new set of policies that have now come out, I think we have absolute clarity in telling people that policy is not the real problem. Now it's, if you can go build a SpaceX, if you have the money for it and the technology for it, you can do that in India. That was not the case in 2017. So I think, as Rohan was saying, we are in the right direction. We are getting there. A lot more work has to be done, but I think it's a great starting point now.
Absolutely. And it also gives you a lot of exposure to other international companies that are also doing that, private space companies. And I'm going to come to that point with Tanveer Ahmed of Digantara. Tanveer, Digantara has just done their launch with SpaceX. Can you tell our audience about that? What was it about?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me here. As a company, we focus on tracking space objects. So today, many of you might have come from an aircraft over here, and you had a pretty comfortable flight, I would assume, and you did not have a fear that another aircraft would come and collide into you, right? So that's
space debris.
Yeah.
Space debris monitoring is what you're essentially doing. Yes.
Yes. So essentially, we do something how aircraft's traffic is managed through tracking, by tracking with radars and things like that. We do something similar for space. We track every object in space, be it a satellite or a debris, and we ensure the traffic is managed and coordinated and ensure that no accidents happen in space. The satellite that we just launched 1.5 months back with SpaceX is one of the world's first satellites that can gather data of other space objects from space. So that's essentially what Scott, our satellite, was.
And how was that experience working with other private space companies abroad? Because, of course, space is one sector that would require global cooperation if it is to be a successful venture. And it can't be country-centric or country-specific, because our aim essentially has to be space for all humanity. So when we're looking at that goal of space for all humanity, how was that experience? Was it very smooth for you to collaborate with other companies?
So I think right now most of the action is happening in the private space ecosystem, and most if not all of the private ecosystem is funded by venture capitalists, and by that we are it's in our blood to collaborate and build partnerships, build business cases. So I think on that front it has been fairly easy in terms of creating partnerships. But I think where sort of the challenges lies is these are the first set of business cases that are being created. These are first set of missions that are being launched. And while this is being there, there is revenues that is being created while these steps are taken in space. This is one of the first times where space is being quite literally commercialized and business cases are being created in orbit. So more of a creation of a market along with while you create technologies and scale technologies. So there's quite a lot of interesting conversation that happens while we have discussions on creation of markets. I remember one of the first conversation, let's say with Rohan in 2020, when we first, one of the first major milestones of the company, we first went to Bellatrix office and then went and signed a deal. But right now, from there till now, we are collaborating on multiple projects and seeing how the technologies that they are building, the technologies that we are building can come together and create business cases. So that's interesting sort of a trajectory that we follow.
So that's really the way forward. Dr. Mike Massimino, coming back to you, I want to understand from your perspective, since our space startups are just taking off right now, what would your advice be to some of the young entrepreneurs who are getting into the space sector? Because we are discussing next in space. So what would you advise? What are some of the key areas of the space industry that one should be tapping in? What should we be building in India?
I think that there's so many different areas that we can be looking at now, and that it could be satellite communications. It could be protecting people in space, being able to protect them from the radiation, the harshness as we're going further. The great accomplishment that India had with the Chandrayaan lander on the moon, for example, is a precursor to sending people there, and it's a very harsh area. And what was interesting about the area that the lander went to was that it's a possibility of water being there, and eventually sending people to that area. So being able to find the resources and use the resources on the moon or whatever else where we might explore, being able to support life there and protect people in this very harsh environment. I think there's so many different areas to look into, both with people and with communications and with science exploration, that I think it's looking at what people are most interested in. If I was an entrepreneur, I think I would be thinking, well, where, from what my interests are, where do I think I would be able to contribute the most? And then I think it's building the team. There's so many great young people that are interested in exploring space, not only because it's cool to explore space, but you can also be entrepreneurial in this day and age. I teach at Columbia University. I'm an engineering professor now. I left NASA 10 years ago. And the students that I've had, a lot of them are from the United States, but also from India and around the world, are so interested and passionate about the space program. If I was a young entrepreneur, I would go into the back here where we have all the students and see who we could team up with, because I think the young people today are so passionate and qualified and smart and well-educated. I think that's what I would do. I would try to attract as much talent as I could and pick an area out of there's so many areas you could go into, but pick the one that you say, okay, this is what I'm most interested in, this is what I'm passionate about, because I think there's going to be bumps in the road no matter what you do in general, whatever you pursue. So if you have that passion for what you're doing, that'll allow you to persevere through those. So I think there's so many things to choose from. For me, I would choose, human life support and what we could do to help people get to space. But it's propulsion materials. There's many areas that you could look into. I would follow the passion, collect a good team, and go for it.
Okay, Rohan, I want to understand from your perspective as well. The same question, because you already reached a certain point in your journey as a space startup where you've probably studied the sector really well. So if you were to perhaps give some advice to young entrepreneurs who want to enter the space sector, what would you suggest that these are some of the areas where perhaps India is lacking, or that we don't have enough private space companies that are working on certain aspects of space? What's your suggestion going to be?
Okay, it's very interesting. I'll answer in two parts. The first, we need to understand what's the space market about. Currently, it's $450 billion US dollars. At the end of 2030, it's going to reach $1 trillion. And the Prime Minister's vision is having one of the best space agencies in the world. Why do we contribute less than 0.5% to this global space industry? So you need more private people. That gives you an answer to the PM's vision. Second, as Mike said, Earth is a very fragile planet with a fragile ecosystem. And we are class 0 in the evolution scale. So we are dependent on the natural resources for our own survival. So you can't continue to mine Earth for our existence. So mining on the moon or asteroids is no longer science fiction, and that's happening. But how do you do it cost effectively? You know gold is available underneath the ocean. You don't mine because the cost of mining is more than the value of gold. Similarly, why don't I mine on the moon? It's the cost. So now there are people willing to fund for this, go to the moon, mine, bring natural resources,
Okay, so
save the planet.
Srinath, I'm going to take a follow-up on that. Go to the moon. That's always been in conversation. Of course, we've managed to land on the moon, but there's a lot of chatter about becoming an interplanetary species. Do you see that happening in our lifetime? And I'm being very specific, in our lifetime.
Yeah, I think the first set of deep space missions with people will happen. I don't know if it'll be at a level where it'll actually be sustainable enough in terms of scale. But I think the first set of deep space missions with people will happen in our lifetimes, if you're getting there. I think the number of technologies will have to be developed, in an economical way to do that at scale. That is still yet to be figured out, right? And that actually connects us back to the previous questions you were asking. That is why space entrepreneurship, there is so much more scope, because I'm seeing this journey happen again and again over the last 60 years. There's a technology that's first figured out, but then it's too expensive to commercialize. And then you see some player or a group of players come in and then they execute it to some level of, economical to make economical sense. And then after that, that becomes almost like a trivial technology, and then you start building on top of that. So that, I think, about 200 or 300 technologies like that will have to be figured out for human space missions to happen at scale to say we are actually truly interplanetary as a species. But that's the opportunity also.
Yeah, so as we move towards more and more opportunity and more companies coming up and more companies sending, in a way, material up in space, that's where, Tanveer, I come back to you. What role do you think tracking of the space debris is going to play? Because the next big conversation, say 10 years from now, is going to be that we've sent up too many things in space and we don't know how to really manage the space debris. That's a really critical part of a conversation about next in space, about the sustainability of managing the space debris. So how do you think that's going to chart out?
So I think we are already at a place where I think we'll have sustained commercial human presence in orbit maybe in a decade or two. So that means orbits have always been sort of a resource where you place satellites, but right now that's also a resource where you can place humans. So once humans, lift their feet from ground, you need to ensure that wherever you are, it's pretty safe. So till now, the space has been utilized in such a way that, like any other industry like oil or gas, the resource, the space and orbits have been exploited. But right now, it's the inflection points, it's the markets have been created, enough space missions have been operated, such that both the space industry and space sustainability both has to go hand in hand. And that's when a sustainable sort of business cases would be created and sustained presence of humans will be there. So as I usually like to say, we have to ensure that our orbits are infinitely sustainable, which are not there as of today. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Massimino, of course, I want to circle back to you and I want to ask you the same question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask, which is what I just asked Srinath as well. Do you feel that we will be an interplanetary species in our lifetime? And that's a conversation that happens a lot in the United States of America about becoming an interplanetary species. Do you think that's going to happen in our lifetime?
Interplanetary species? Like going other places and living there?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's exciting for me is the opportunity we've had a lot of experience in low Earth orbit, but now the opportunity to go back to the moon. And we haven't had people on the moon for over 50 years. I was a very little boy. This what inspired me to become an astronaut. I was 6 years old when Neil Armstrong took those first steps on the moon. But we haven't been back in a long time. But we're not going to go back just for a visit. We're going to go back to settle there. And I think the accomplishment that India had with the moon landing, we just had another one launched last night from the United States, another private mission. And so it's not just governments anymore. It's also these private companies. And so we're great countries like India, the United States, and other countries that are spacefaring. It's not just their governments now, it's also their companies, the ingenuity that they have in the commercial areas to do these things. So I think now we really stand a chance to accomplish this because so many people are getting involved, not just countries, but companies. So I think that the moon is the starting point for that. We have a lot of experience in low Earth orbit, lots of, over 20 years of experience of people being there around 24 hours a day, every day since. But now, what's it like to live on a planetary surface? How can you find water? How can you use the resources there? And the moon is close enough that we can still get back if there's an emergency. We can have communications back and forth between the Earth and the moon so that when there's help needed, we can supply it. And I think that's going to be the place that will be the launch pad to go further to Mars and other places. So I'm very excited about what's going to happen. I think in the next few years, that'll lead us to being interplanetary, not just the moon, but other planets as well.
Dr. Massimino, I also have a slightly philosophical question for you. So, for a very long time in India, we had a slight mindset where we would really say, okay, this is possible, this is not possible. And that mindset has shifted in the past decade, okay, drastically, as some of our startup founders have also pointed out, that the opportunities they didn't have before, which were just not possible, they're now possible, right? And we don't write anything off anymore. But that's a mindset that America has always had. And that's why you have, or rather that's the impression that we get, that America always dreams really big. Right? So they follow that you dream of the moon, but you land on the stars. So I want to understand from your perspective, how do you suggest, this is a philosophical question, how do you suggest that we adapt more of that mindset where we just say, this will be possible?
Yeah. I think the mindset that I think I've had, that I learned and that we had at NASA was that when you first sometimes hear about an objective you want to do, if you're dreaming big, you want to go to the moon, you want to build a space station, you want to have a lander on the South Pole of the moon, these things might seem impossible. And I think I was told by one of the moonwalkers, Alan Bean, it was a mentor, he was out of the 12 people that walked on the moon, he was the fourth, and he told me, Mike, at some point in your career, you're gonna be asked to do something that's impossible. You're gonna dream about something that's impossible. Don't think of it that as impossible. Start talking about it with a group of creative people. Start exchanging ideas, and what you'll find is that it's not impossible. It's just really, really hard. So I think when you have these impossible dreams, I think it's important to have a good creative group of people with different ideas. This is why I think countries collaborating and getting a very diverse mixture of people together is important, because you're never going to solve the major problems, the difficult problems, if everyone thinks the same way. You need people that think differently. And then you start realizing, okay, maybe it's not impossible, it's just really, really hard. And the other thing that I tried to keep in mind, and I found like in my life, because I applied many times to become an astronaut. I was rejected twice. I was medically disqualified once. And I just kept trying, and I felt like, you think things might be 1,000,000 to 1, and it can't happen, but that's not true. It's just very unlikely, some of these impossible things. And the only way that something is truly impossible is if you don't try, or if you give up. If you don't try or you give up, then you know the outcome, and yes, it is impossible. If you don't try, it's impossible. If you give up, it will be impossible. So I think that's what you need to keep in mind is, no matter how hard it is, don't give up and surround yourself with a diverse team of thinkers to attack the problem.
That's an absolutely lovely thought. I just have another 1 minute left, so I'm going to quickly go across the aisle here. Rohan, I just want to understand from all three of your perspectives, the next decade for space, what does that look like?
What does it look like?
Yes. What is the next decade of space? How do you envision it?
Science fiction, turning science fiction into reality is what we see, and a lot of capital being spent on space. But the beauty of space is, yes, it is expensive, but the rewards are much bigger. The first software code was written for Apollo lunar landing, right? But now software is a different industry in itself. Same thing is going to repeat. You're going to see that Apollo era, the 60s, the late 60s. So that's what we predict for the next 10 years.
Okay, Srinath.
I think adding on to Rohan's point, I think at least in India, it's going to become a lot more commonplace, not more normal to talk about it. When we started Agnikul, I was a little shy to go and tell people that we were building a rocket company. I think that will become a little more normalized, and that's a sign of the country and the community actually embracing space to also be something that you can actually have a so-called normal trajectory in that one as well. So I think that is going to be the next decade.
And I think you guys are setting a great example for parents and young people in the audience as well. When they see you as successful entrepreneurs in the space sector, I'm sure they take that back home with them, and some dreams get built here as well. Tanveer, I'll leave the last word with you. 20 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think we have launched both in Earth orbits and interplanetary orbits. I think in the next decade we'll be doing that at scale. So I think I would like to end it with launch, baby, launch.
Okay, all right. That's great. That's a great thought to end it on. Once again, I thank Tanveer Ahmed, Srinath Ravichandran, Mr. Rohan Ganapathy, and last but not least, and once again, sir, an honor to have you with us, Dr. Mike Massimino. Thank you so much.